Hey everyone, this is Mike from the Comic Book Trove, here today with another Omnibus review, and today I'm going to be taking a look at the Golden Age Simon and Kirby. This is one of the omnibuses released as part of the Timely's Greatest collection that Marvel did a few years ago now, about 4 years ago I think, to celebrate their 80th anniversary as a company. A few months ago I took a look at the Timely's Greatest Submariner, the pre-war years omnibus, and today I'm going to be looking at this Simon and Kirby material, which features, of course, primarily Captain America. That is what the bulk of this omnibus is. There's also quite a few other things here, including, as we see here, mention of the Vision and the Fiery Mask. The Vision there not to be confused with the android character, who's a member of the Avengers team. This was the original version of that character, and we'll have a look at what that character is in a bit more detail as I flick through the book properly in a moment. But I just want to look at this dust jacket. This was the standard variant cover of the omnibus. There was also a bit of a different design for the direct market variant, but I got the standard version for each of these books when they came out. I think that they are still available. I don't think it's officially out of print, this book, but it might be getting a bit hard to find now just because it has been a few years since it came out. But if you are interested, it's surely worth looking around to try and find it. On the back there you get the full list of the contents, the material collected in the book. And underneath the dust jacket, really love this, the design of the artwork on the hardcover itself. For each one of these Timely's Greatest books, I think they did a great job with giving the actual hardcover a nice wraparound image featuring some classic old school comic book art, Golden Age artwork. And obviously we're going to see a whole lot of that as we look through this book. The Golden Age is really a very different era of comics to what we're used to in much more recent years, you know. This is material that is, I think it should go without saying, it's stating the obvious really, but this is very old stuff, so it's going to be very outdated in many ways. I think that there does actually, the book does include kind of a warning, or a disclaimer, I guess you'd call it, to say that, you know, it is dated material. There are going to be some references, some stereotypes maybe in the artwork and the storytelling that would not go today, you know, things that wouldn't fly these days. It's just trying to say that it's all a product of its time ultimately. But I don't think anything has been censored. I think it is all presented as it was originally presented, which in my opinion is how it should be. I think that you know, we've got to acknowledge things as they were and present the artwork as it was originally intended, faults and all. On this page here, we see there's a lot of creators involved. So this is, you know, billed as the Simon and Kirby book, but in addition to those two, there were plenty of other writers, artists all working on the stuff in here at the time. A few people, sadly, weren't credited properly. You know, it just goes to show you what things were like in those days. Not everybody was actually credited in the way that they should have been. So there is a whole section here of unknown credits. And also we get the earliest work by Stan Lee as well here. It's quite interesting to see. He did a couple of text features in early Captain America issues 3 to 7, when he was very young at this time. I think he was about 19, 20 as he got his first work doing that stuff. Then the content itself breaks down everything that we're going to see in here. So it starts off with a few, I'm going to say lesser characters, because a lot of these characters I did not know about whatsoever before getting this book and having a look through it. But characters like the Fiery Mask, the Phantom Bullet, Trojak, the Tiger Man, the Vision, you know, that original Vision character we've already briefly touched upon, before you get to Captain America Comics #1. And then from that point onwards, a lot of what's in the rest of this omnibus are those Captain America issues. This collects the first 10 issues of Captain America Comics. Which means that it is a book that you would do a lot of double dipping with if you had that Golden Age Captain America book, which I think had the first 12 issues in it of Captain America. You get the first 10 in here, plus other stuff. Now, because I'm not a huge Golden Age kind of aficionado, I'm not a massive fan of this era of comics, I didn't personally see the need to get those Golden Age Cap volumes. I was quite happy with what I got in here. This kind of gave me my fill of Golden Age comics. It was something that I was more than happy with. And what we'll see as we flick through here, as I'm sure you hopefully can see, is that the quality of the restoration that went into this book and the Timely's Greatest omnibus line in general, everything that they put in those omnis was just meticulously and beautifully restored. You know, these look like they could have been at the time, brand new comics, but just produced in a kind of an old-fashioned style to pay homage to the Golden Age. That's how good they look. They are absolutely beautiful. Got to appreciate and respect the work that went into that, if nothing else. Even if you look at this and think there's no way I could enjoy reading that, it just looks too old. Believe me, I can kind of understand that point, but you got to surely at least admire just how good these look, because it would have been no easy task to go through the original images, the scans of all this stuff, and to make it look as great as it does here. Yeah, so the material itself then is, like I say, I mean, I freely admit that I'm not really the biggest fan of the Golden Age. I find it is superhero comics in their infancy. This is very much the medium before it became kind of well respected in any way, in the sense that it kind of is today. Comics went decades and decades without being a respected form of artwork, but in these days in particular, you can tell that the way that they were written and presented was very much as intended to be kind of just throwaway things, written primarily for young audiences, mainly kids, really. And I don't think anybody really expected any of the characters who were created in these stories back in the day to stand the test of time. So obviously the big one we're going to be looking at in this book is Captain America, who we are about to flip onto the first comic collecting his stories, with this absolutely iconic cover to Captain America Comics issue number 1, that famous image of Cap just socking Hitler on the jaw. One of the all-time great covers, no doubt. That is just amazing stuff. And then, you jump into Cap here and you get that classic story. This is the story of Steve Rogers going through the scientific experiment that grants him the kind of super abilities, that superhuman strength. He becomes a super soldier and then goes on to become Captain America. With his young partner Bucky. This is one thing that I think is definitely a product of its time. The whole kid sidekick thing, that was always more of a DC thing, really. Kind of Batman and Robin being the best example of that. Marvel, from the 60s onwards anyway, never really did the whole kid sidekick thing, maybe with the big exception being Rick Jones, who, in his earliest years was just kind of hanging around with different superheroes. But Bucky is very much the kind of classic young sidekick, the young ward kind of character. And in these stories, it's kind of exactly what you'd probably expect it to be. It's a lot of fighting Germans and the Japanese. At the end of the day, these stories were written in a time where, war was going on. Even though the US hadn't officially joined the war at this point in time, there were many people in the US, Jack Kirby and Joe Simon included, who very much felt that that the country should be involved. So they were in no means subtle, that first cover literally shows Cap hitting Hitler on the face. So, they made their feelings on the matter very clear. So you'd see a lot of stories in here with Germans and the Japanese, who were, of course, obviously the enemy back then, being presented as the villains of these stories. One thing that's, quite cheesy is the whole element of Steve Rogers trying to keep his identity as Captain America secret. So as Steve Rogers, he is in the army, but kind of plays the sort of bumbling fool, finds an excuse to run off, change into costume, do something as Cap, and then get back just in time to get shouted at and, I don't know, berated by his superior officers, told to go clean the toilets or something like that. Yeah, like I say, these aren't amazing stories. You're not going to read them, I don't think, and think that there's some great sophisticated, mature storytelling going on here. It's just not the case. But the fascinating thing about this stuff, in my opinion, is just how interesting it is from a historical perspective. To go back and to look at characters like Captain America, who've now been around for 80 years, and kind of see these earliest stories, featuring the Red Skull as well, another popular, well-known villain. And he's been around from pretty much the very beginning as well. To see how these characters started out, it's always been something that I've really enjoyed in general, for characters who've been around for, many decades. as a lot of superheroes have been. And it's always quite interesting to see how they started out and to see what kind of elements were there from the very beginning that have sort of remained as part of that character's DNA to this day. So it is a bit of a kind of fascinating character study in a way to go back and to look at these. But I can't say that they're my favourite comics or that I would include them amongst any of my favourite comics. You know, like I say, as stories to just read, they are okay, but never great. You know, that's the fact of it. And unless you are somebody who knows that you are particularly interested in older comics and in the Golden Age specifically, I'd have a tough time recommending this, you know, because otherwise, if that's not the case, I don't think you're going to find a lot here that kind of changes your mind on that, really. If you've given this sort of stuff a try before and didn't enjoy it, I don't think that if you were to go ahead and find a copy of this book and to buy it, that it would, you know, change your opinion on that, really. But if you're curious and if taking a look through this book, you know, it's something that makes you feel like it might be of interest to you, then definitely I'd say it is worth checking out. Like I say, if you've got that interest in looking at how characters started out from their earliest days, that's really the biggest appeal of what this book's all about. Along with, just as I mentioned at first of all, the fact that the artwork is so beautifully restored in here. That's the thing that I think I enjoy the most about these collections, just how great they look. The artwork, it's been made to look truly stunning. And even just flicking through this book in this kind of way, without properly reading it, I see a lot of stuff to admire just because of that, you know, from a purely artistic point of view. But if you have read this stuff before, you know, as always, would definitely be curious to hear the thoughts of others, you know, other people who have got that kind of appreciation for the Golden Age, people who are probably bigger fans of this stuff than I am. Like I say, not my favourite stuff really, but I can enjoy it on some level, to the point where I'm happy to have these books, these timeless greatest books. Don't have a huge amount of Golden Age collections. In fact, I only have the 3 timeless greatest omnibuses that I have. That Submariner one that I've covered before, this one obviously, and the Human Torch one as well, which I will also showcase on the channel at some point. Let me know if that's something you'd be interested in seeing, and can always do it sooner rather than later. But other than that, yeah, not really something that I've ever collected in too much detail. I had the first couple of Golden Age Batman omnibuses at one point. I don't have them anymore. Did sell them on because I didn't enjoy them all that much, you know. But these are ones I'm happy to have and to keep, because I had a bit of a better time reading these. There's some cool extras in the back, you know, various different sort of little stories and bonus covers, other cool bits and pieces here and there. It's all pretty interesting to flick through. But yeah, thanks as always for watching this video all the way through. If you've stuck with me, that is appreciated as always. And as I say, if you've got any thoughts and opinions to share on this material, just loving this as a final page of the book though. A modern homage cover by Alex Ross, of course, the great Alex Ross, recreating that Captain America issue 1 cover. Yeah, really great. I mean, that's just one of the very best covers ever, isn't it? You know. But yes, as I say, thanks as always for watching this. That is appreciated, and I'll be back in soon to discuss something else.